they will want to contribute back because they get rid of a maintenance problem. If it is differentiating, they may not want to contribute that source code, but eventually someone else will contribute it, or innovation moves on and the layer considered differentiating will eventually become non-differentiating. So if anything, there might be a time delay until something is contributed. So I don't think cloud computing will hurt open source in a narrow sense. So what I really like about open source, of course, is the innovation. There are multiple aspects of it. One simply is that because of the available, we've heard a lot about that, it becomes possible for users to innovate on all levels, even with respect to, for example, eventually the car vehicle infotainment, though of course we may want to be cautious about that. Maybe more importantly from a commercial perspective, if you look at how Silicon Valley startups what software they are based on, it's open source all the way. They grab a LAMP stack, it's still a few guys or gals in a garage. They grab a LAMP stack, just free software that they have known through their university days, and develop their web service or cloud computing service. And there's almost no startup cost, no license fees, no training to be paid. And if they want to outsource or quickly have to grow the labor force, well, it's commodity software by now, so they can draw all over the world on labor that knows the software, because as open source it has always been, or has been for a while, freely available. So open source makes it really cheap to start an innovative software company and provide a service that is somehow useful to a customer using an open source stack. And finally, I'm not sure how to address it. I liked the talk about libraries and how it's aligned with open source. If you look at Wikipedia, it's a lot of librarians who are actually developing or writing on Wikipedia. So I think open source also transports a value system. We call it open collaboration. It's collaboration that's self-organizing, meritocratic, and egalitarian. Everyone can contribute. You're based solely on the quality of your contribution, not on your senior status or anything. And you make up your own process so that it works for you. This is a value system that is across cultural boundaries, along professional dimensions like software development is being spread here. I don't know the consequences of that, but I think it's an important undercurrent going on in open source as well. All right, thank you.
Yeah, like most people here as well as there, I think happy days are ahead for open source. Looking ahead 10 years, there are going to be much better technologies, greater acceptance by industry, government, and so on and so forth. But greater market share for open source. I think that there seems to be an agreement on all of that. What I might do here is sitting where we are sitting in Saudi Arabia, and coming from where I'm coming from, that's Asia. I might just want to draw some attention to asking, okay, in these happy days, how are we going to be benefited? Like in which way regions like this are going to derive benefits from this, growth in open source that we are agreeing it's going to happen. What I mean by that is, can we benefit economically and culturally from this whole growth we see? When I ask that is that in the earlier phase of maybe IT and software, we haven't been able to benefit as much from it as the rest of the world have been. So is the future going to be different in that regard because it's just going to be open source? Or are we going to have to again see new Microsofts and new IBMs and new Capgeminis coming in, having to go to them to seeking our own solutions, right? For our requirements in Arabia, India, and so on. That's something that concerns me. That is, and why this is important here in the open source conference would be that we need to set our own national, regional agendas in the open source space, which addresses, in my mind, two major themes. One is that we need to develop solutions and software that addresses local market, local needs in our own regions and our own countries. But why I'm saying that is, for example, where I come from in India, most of the open source, most of the software activities is not addressing local needs at all. It's export oriented. I think 85% of our earnings come from exports. Very little of that goes into addressing local needs, the national needs, which I believe open source community need to make a conscious effort in these regions that we address those problems. Those problems are not being addressed today by the commercial corporations in India at least is because of the margins are small, profit margins are quite small because paying capacity of most of the people in our country is not high, right? And if open source is not so much driven by the ROI concerns, then that makes it that we should be addressing those problems of local economy and local social needs. The second part, I think, where open source communities in regions like these should be addressing is on the issue of languages. What Dr. Enes just mentioned yesterday in passing, that how are we present on the internet? For example, everybody knows that about 90% of the contents on the internet is actually contributed by some 7-8 languages. In the sense, out of some 3,000 languages, 2,990 they add to 10% of the content. So when we today go to internet, what are we looking at? It's obviously coming from India. I can tell you, we aren't seeing any content on the internet in our languages. So the more we drive our people towards internet, which has to happen because internet is going to be where the entire knowledge is going to be. So that means they are driven more towards English. I mean, people learn today English because they can access internet, which is absolutely a must. I mean, internet, without internet, really can't move forward. So the point is that something has to be done to enhance the content of let me use the words non-Western languages. I don't mean to be parochial particularly, but that's a fact. So that we go to internet and we see content in our own languages, right? Of course, it's a well-known problem all over the world, and I think open source communities in these regions, I don't mean, when I say communities, I mean the whole ecosystem, which has the government, which the academia, the industry, and so on, in the whole regions, have to address this point that how do we put contents in our own languages on the internet? So that when I go to internet, my child goes to internet, that child still sees my culture there, my language there. It doesn't get alienated just because it has to go to internet. So I have a feeling that going forward, 10 years from now we're talking about, I think we need to do something in these regions so that the open source communities in these regions, right, focus on these two main activity, that we look at local requirements, address them, we look at language requirements and address them, and to me it's very important. Though in other words, maybe it sounds that I'm saying don't open so much, close a little bit. I mean, in some sense, close to our own neighborhoods and so on. I don't know whether this is out of context here, but I'm just setting something like an agenda for open source in regions like this, if it makes sense. Thank you.
Before I actually begin to address the issues related to the future, it's better I first elaborate the standpoint, which makes it clear in terms of how to understand the vision. First of all, the very basis on which this whole movement is influencing the society, that's based on a very simple idea. So this whole movement is based on simplicity. That is the copyleft, the idea of the copyleft, that you do a very simple thing like sharing, which is very difficult to be condemned by any civil society, because sharing is the core of human life, because we begin to grow as children by imitating our parents, our brothers and sisters, so that the act of copying left, right and center actually places us as cognitive beings inheriting our past, and that's the inheritance of knowledge that starts with copying. And in that sense, the free software movement is actually trying to inform the whole society that let's not forget the very basis of what is it to be a human being. To be a human being